You should have co-host access now.
All right, let me see if I can
And
pin.
Angel, yeah, I think it is. It's because you're involving more senses, right? And when you involve more senses, when you're encoding information, you're going to form stronger memories. Okay. So something that I wanted to ask you all, we do have a student in our class who would really benefit from having someone to take notes. She's wanting to pay attention to our ASL interpreters, and it's really hard to take notes while you're also trying to watch an interpreter, right? Some of us can listen and not watch, and so while we're listening, we can take notes. So if possible, it would be really great if someone would, who knows that they're a pretty good note taker, if you would volunteer to share your notes. If you would be willing to volunteer, you can type into the chat that you're willing to, and I will connect you with our awesome student Amber. So if you like to take notes, maybe if you don't like to, it doesn't matter, but if you take notes while you watch, good. Okay, so we do have someone who's willing to volunteer.
And I'm good to go.
Perfect, awesome, all right, perfect timing. So I'm gonna go ahead and start recording now, just so you're all aware, and the recording of this video will be available on Canvas.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, so let's get started on chapter 1. Again, go ahead and pull out your notes. If it's helpful to you, maybe even have your textbook with you. Okay. So these are our goals for this lesson, and you'll find these goals as well on our Canvas page. This is what I'm hoping that you're going to learn by the end of the week. Okay, so let's start off. We're actually going to start with an activity. On your piece of paper, hopefully you have one out. If you don't have a piece of paper out, that's okay. We're going to use the chat box to do it, but it's helpful for you to write things down as well so you remember what we're learning in this activity. So in this activity we're going to do, I want you to try and guess my rule. So I have a set of numbers here, and if you've taken a class from me before, you might have seen this already, so that's okay. We're going to show you this set of numbers, right? 2, 4, 6. 2, 4, 6 does fit into a rule that I have in my head, right? So I have a rule in my head about numbers, and this set of 3 numbers does fit into my rule. What I want you to think about right now is a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a prediction. I want you to predict what the rule is. Don't say it out loud. Don't type it into the chat. I just want you to think about it. If you want to, you can write it down on your notes, on your piece of paper. Right? So have a recording of what you think my rule is. Develop a hypothesis. Okay. Now the next step we're going to do is we're going to do some research. You're going to collect data. And the way you're going to do that is I want you to open up the chat window, and you'll see that there's a button there that says 2. I want you to go to 2 and select me, select my name. And there should be a red thing that pops up that says privately. Make sure that you have it so you're sending a message only to me. Okay, what you're going to do is you have a chance to collect data. I want you to come up with 3 numbers. So in this case, the first numbers that I had 2, 4, and 6, right? I'm telling you right now, those 3 numbers do fit my rule. You're going to come up with 3 numbers you would like to use to test your hypothesis. Okay, and I will tell you, I'm going to respond back to you, yes, it fits my rule, or no, it does not fit my rule. After you've collected data, you can then, maybe, you might need to adjust your hypothesis. Okay. We're going to go through this cycle a couple of times. So go ahead and type in 3 numbers you'd like, and I will tell you yes or no. And give me a moment, because I will respond to all of you, I promise. But there's a lot of you, and so I've got to keep up. Okay, so you are all collecting data right now. I'm letting you know if what you have put, yes, fits my rule, or no, does not fit my rule. As I'm going, you can think about another set of 3 numbers that you would also like to test. And don't type those next 3 numbers in just yet. I'm trying to catch up to everyone who has already done so. There. Okay, so think about my answer if I said yes or no, and see if you think maybe, you know, you need to revise your hypothesis or not. Okay, I think I got everyone. If I didn't get you, type your numbers in one more time. Okay, did I get everyone now?
It looks like Hannah Marie sent them to me as the interpreter, so she may want to resend to you. I think she picked the
Perfect.
wrong person.
So there's not any special data screen. You're just writing down 3 numbers, and I'm telling you yes or no whether it fits my rule. That's the data that you're collecting. So you can come up with 3 numbers that you'd like to use to test your hypothesis. Okay, so I'm going to do it this way. If your name is your preferred name that you have, if it starts between A and N, go ahead and put in a second set of 3 numbers. So I'm going to do it 1/2 of the class at a time. Okay, if your name is from N through Z, your first preferred name, go ahead and type your 3 numbers in now.
Can you say that again? Sorry.
If you haven't gone your second time, go ahead and type 3 numbers in.
Thank you.
No problem. So I won't respond to your hypothesis. I will respond to numbers. So don't tell me what your hypothesis is. Just give me a set of 3 numbers. Okay, so I'm going to do one final set. I know it seems like, why are we still doing this? But I want to give you one more chance to keep going and testing your hypothesis, right? 3 points of data. So if your name is between A and N, go ahead and type in another set of 3 numbers, and I will tell you yes or no. All right. Okay, if you haven't gone yet, go ahead now. So letters, if you're O through Z, I can use the alphabet. All right. Any last minute ones? I can give any last minute data here. Okay. Go ahead now. You can change your chat back to everyone if you'd like to, instead of just me. And what I want to do now is I want to see, does anyone have a hypothesis that they would like to share?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead. What's your hypothesis?
They're all even numbers.
Okay, great. So we have a hypothesis that they are all even numbers. Now, does anyone have any information that you can give us that suggests that that hypothesis is incorrect?
I would make the addition that they're all natural numbers as well.
Okay, well, yeah, that would go with it. If they're all even numbers, they're also all natural numbers. But do you have any evidence that might suggest that the hypothesis that they are all even numbers is incorrect?
You said yes to my numbers, which was 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, so I did say yes to numbers 1, 2, and 3. So if numbers 1, 2, and 3 do fit my rule, then the hypothesis that you have that it has to be even, that isn't correct, right? Okay, so is there another hypothesis that someone would like to test?
Going by a specific pattern.
Okay, going by a specific pattern. Does anyone have a any evidence that doesn't agree with that? Maybe you can give us a little bit more. What do you mean by a specific pattern?
Well, I'm just gathering my evidence from the 3 numbers you told us to test.
Mhm.
My number was 8, 10, 12, so they're going by like a set of 2, like comparison to the first number you gave us.
Mhm.
And with that, my second number was 4, 8, 12, which is going from sets of 4, so it's in like a pattern. And
Okay.
then 3, it's just an addition from 1.
Got it. Okay, so you use the same, in other words, equal intervals.
Yes.
So, okay, so the hypothesis we're testing is that there are equal intervals between the 3 numbers.
Yes.
So if
Correct.
we use 1, 2, and 3, the interval is 1. If we use 2, 4, and 6, the interval is 2. Whatever the interval is between the first 2 numbers is the same for the second 2. Does
Yes.
anyone have any evidence that disagrees with that hypothesis?
It could just be a sequence, like how I forgot which other student said that they got 1, 2, and 3, but it's all in a pattern sequence. Like the numbers aren't out of order.
Okay, so let's focus on our one hypothesis that we've got right now, but we'll come back to that idea, right? So the hypothesis we're testing is that there's equal intervals between the numbers. And I want to know if anyone disagrees, right? Do you have evidence that you've collected, data you've collected, that disagrees with that hypothesis? I think that there should be. Yaki, for instance, I know that you collected some data that does not fit that hypothesis. So, for instance, one of your classmates, Yaki, came up with a set of three numbers, 1, 2, 3.5. And I said yes to that. So the interval between 1 and 2 is only 1, but the interval between 2 and 3.5 is 1.5, right? So they don't have to be equal intervals either. All right, I'm gonna do something really quick here. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down for a question I'm gonna ask you, okay? How many of you, a thumbs up if yes, a thumbs down if no, right? How many of you wrote for your first set of numbers 8, 10, 12? Give me a thumbs up if you wrote 8, 10, 12. Check and look around at what's going on, right? We've got a lot of thumbs up. In fact, I haven't seen any thumbs down. Okay, I've got one thumbs down. So a lot, right? Okay. What rule of those people that put their thumbs up, what rule did you have in your mind?
The rule I went by was even numbers.
Okay, so even numbers. Good. Okay, Caitlin has that too, even numbers. Any other rules that you came up with?
They're divisible by 2.
Okay, divisible by 2. So even numbers, but in a different way of phrasing it. Going by 2s. Okay, so the numbers need to go by 2s. Okay, so I have a question for you. Did looking for evidence that agreed with your hypothesis, did it help you to figure out if your hypothesis was correct? Yes. Some people are saying yes, and some people are saying no. Let's get an answer from one of the people that said no. Why do you think it wasn't helpful to you? I'm just going to tell you right now, all of those hypotheses are incorrect. My rule is not that it's even numbers or that they go up by 2s. Okay, yeah, so that's a great answer here, Caitlin. You're only looking for information that agrees with your thoughts. So it's true, if you had given me any set of numbers that went up by 2s, or any set of numbers that was divisible by 2 in a certain way, I probably would have said yes to you. And the chances of you figuring out that that wasn't my rule are really low. Nothing, actually, you know. So if you said 8, 10, 12, and then 14, 16, 18, you would never get any evidence that disagrees. That's a problem, actually. So I want to tell you a little bit more about what the rule actually is. I'm going to share my screen one more time here. Okay. So we know that the rule is not that the numbers go up by 2s. We also know that the rule is not that they are even numbers because we had evidence, right? Someone tried to test 1, 2, 3. So it's not even, and it's not that they go up by 2s. It's not that they are equal intervals because someone tested 1, 2, 3.5, and that was fine, which also rules out that they have to be whole numbers, right? Now, what would you want to do to test your hypothesis even more? Let's say we've decided, okay, it's not even numbers, it's not goes up by 2, it's not equal intervals. What hypothesis do you have in your mind now that I've told you all of this information? Do you have a new hypothesis that you'd like to test? Okay, all positive numbers. Let's try that. Okay, so we have a hypothesis that they are all positive numbers. What would you want to do to test that hypothesis?
Like negative numbers.
Yeah, try negative numbers. So let's try that. What is a set of 3 negative numbers that you'd want to try? Okay, so 1, 3, and 5 are still positive numbers, but they do fit the rule. Yeah. What's a set of negative numbers that you'd want to try? Okay, so -1, -2, -3. That actually does not fit my rule. Is there another set of negative numbers you'd like to try? -2, -4, -6 does not fit my rule. Neither does -2, -4, -8, or -1, -3, -5. What do these things all have in common with each other? I'm saying no to them, right? But what else do they have in common? So they all are negative, definitely. Is there anything else they have in common? The equal intervals part, we figured out that doesn't matter, right? So it is correct, they do have equal intervals, but that's not why I'm saying no. So it does have something to do with the sequencing of the numbers. The single digits doesn't matter. 2, 4, and 6 are all single digits, right? And I said yes to that. So let's look again here at our list. -1, -2, -3, -2, -4, -6, -2, -4, -8, -1, -3, -5. So they all are negative. And I did say yes to most of the numbers above 0, but there's still something that we're missing here. And I think I'm gonna give it away. But all of the sets that you gave me, the numbers are becoming more negative. Right? The numbers are getting further and further from 0. They're becoming more negative. So let's try and test another set of numbers that's negative, but instead of the numbers becoming more negative, maybe try a different pattern. Okay, so -0.5, what's the second and third number you'd like to test? Okay, so -5, -4, -3 does fit my rule. So we got a yes to one of these sets of negative numbers. So the numbers being negative actually doesn't matter. Right? But the way that we figured this out, the way that we tested this, is by looking for information that disagrees with what we believe. And that's really not intuitive, right? So we did this, we repeated steps 2 and 3 a bunch, right? So what did we learn from this process? You might still be like, I have no idea what just happened. I'm going to tell you right now what my rule is. My rule is that the numbers just have to go up. It doesn't matter how much they go up by, they just have to go up in any way, right? So it could be 0.1, 0.5, 10 million. It could be -6, 0, +6. As long as the numbers are increasing in order, it does fit my rule. Do you think you ever would have come to that answer if you tested only the rule that you thought by only trying to agree with it? Right? Let's start from the premise numbers go up by 2s. If we only look for numbers that do go up by 2s, would you ever find out your hypothesis was wrong? No. You'd never find out because it'd be like, oh yeah, she said yes, she said yes, she said yes. This is the same thing that we do in everyday life. We do this all the time. It's human nature. The problem that we've encountered is called confirmation bias. It's when you look for information that agrees with what you believe. And we all do this. It's human nature, okay? There's nothing wrong with you for having done it. In fact, the vast majority of you did, right? That happens every single time I do this. Almost everyone looks for the numbers that agree with what we believe. But what's the problem? If we're only looking for numbers that agree with what we believe, we're not coming any closer to the truth. So as scientists, what we do is instead of looking for information that agrees, we actually try and disprove ourselves. As a scientist, there's an interesting thing that we do. We believe that we should always be looking for disconfirming or disproving evidence. So whatever our hypothesis is, the best test of it is to try and prove ourselves wrong. And the reason for that is because if I try again and again and again to prove myself wrong, I've come up with every creative thing I can think of to prove myself wrong, and I can't. If I try and try and try and I cannot prove myself wrong no matter what I do, and I really am trying super hard to prove myself wrong, that's actually great evidence that your hypothesis is correct. Okay, I'm going to say it one more time because it's like a little bit weird. If you try to prove yourself wrong over and over and over again, and you can't prove yourself wrong, that's really good evidence that your hypothesis is probably right. Now, the reason I say probably is because we're not perfect, right? Humans are not perfect. And I probably didn't come up with every possible number combination that might be against my hypothesis, right? There's probably something I haven't thought of yet. And so I can't say for sure that I've proved my hypothesis to be correct. I found a lot of support for it, but I haven't proved it. In fact, in science, we never use that word. If you see someone writing, and we proved that blah, 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 they are not a scientist, or not a good one. Scientists are really, really wary of using the word prove, because for us, it takes all of the evidence that you could possibly ever collect to have, without a shadow of a doubt, be able to say prove. Okay, so we don't say prove because we're always looking for disconfirming evidence, for evidence to disprove ourselves. So disprove is fine, but prove is not. Okay, so confirmation bias is something we learned. We have this problem. We tend to look for information that agrees with what we believe. Now, in this context of figuring out my numbers rule, it's not the end of the world, right? Who cares if you figured out if you were wrong, right, about my numbers rule? Are there other times in your life when you have seen confirmation bias happen? When you've seen yourself or other people only look for information that agrees with what they believe? Facebook. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great question here. So does disproving our hypothesis make it stronger? If we try really hard to disprove our hypothesis and we can't, that does give us evidence that our hypothesis is correct. So it's kind of this weird opposite thing, right? It's the opposite of what is intuitive. If I try to disprove myself and I can't, that gives me evidence my hypothesis is probably correct, right? If I try to disprove myself and it turns out like, oh, you know, I tried 1, 2, and 3, even though I thought that the numbers had to go up by 2s, and you told me I was wrong, well, that's good, because it's like, oh, my hypothesis is wrong. Let me revise it, right? So every time you try to disprove yourself, it gives you a chance to either correct your opinion or give you more support for what your opinion is. Yes, great point, Angel. Your hypothesis must be disprovable. It's what we call falsifiable. Okay, and we'll talk more about falsifiability in a bit here. But yeah, you have to be able to try to disprove it. If you can't even try, then it's not scientific. So confirmation bias. And you bring up a really great example, Caitlin. Facebook is a place where people tend to only look at the information that they already agree with. Almost all of our social media does that. it actually is designed to do that. The things that you like and you click on, it tries to give you more of that. The problem is that it means you're never going to get any kind of information that disagrees with you, and it will make your beliefs even more strong that you have to be correct, even though there could be really good evidence over here that you're not, right? So Chris, it's a good point. It is an echo chamber. And this is how problems like conspiracy theories happen, right? Where people believe something that is just not true, but they're surrounding themselves with only people that agree, right? If you're constantly hearing from people that agree with you, the sky is green, and you're always hearing the sky is green, eventually you're going to be like, you know what, the sky is green. And I feel very strongly about that. And you've suddenly invested in something that's not real. And if you're only looking for information that agrees with you, you'll never find anything else. Yeah, so the earth is flat. That's another one, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that with anything in your life, right, exactly what Caitlin is saying, with anything in your life, if you want to be accurate, if you want to find the truth, you cannot only look for information that agrees with what you believe. You have to look for information that disagrees. Because if you try your hardest to find information that disagrees and you can't, you might actually be right. But you have to try really hard to find information that disagrees, right? You have to have an open mind to the possibility that you're wrong. If you don't have that open mind to the possibility that you're wrong, you have confirmation bias. You're never opening yourself up to potentially the truth, right? So scientists take this approach. When we do research, we are trying to disprove ourselves. And we try as hard as we can, right? And if over and over a number of different studies we try to disprove our hypothesis and we can't, it gives us confidence that our hypothesis might be correct. And if we're wrong, then it lets us go back to the drawing board and fix our hypothesis, to try it again, try a new hypothesis. We're looking to get closer and closer to whatever that truth is, right? So this is a principle that is important to you in science, yeah. But honestly, I think it's really important for you in your real life. This is like one of the most important things, in my opinion, that you'll learn in this class. So not that I want you to like tune out for the rest of the class, but if you take this point away, that I need to be trying to disprove myself if I want to get to the truth, right? That is probably one of the best lessons you can ever learn. That you need to be open to other people's perspectives. You need to be open to other people's opinions to some extent, right? And ask, what is your evidence? Right? When someone gave a hypothesis, I asked, does anyone have evidence that disagrees? I didn't want your opinion, right? I didn't want another hypothesis. I wanted evidence. So when someone said the numbers go up by 2s, and I asked for evidence that disagreed, I was looking for data, right? And someone did give us data. Someone said, oh, but we collected this data that says 1, 2, and 3 was correct. Right? So the same thing with every aspect of your life, whether it's, you know, I don't know, reading a blog post or reading some clickbait article on Facebook, someone telling you about, I don't know, some political thing even, right? You need to question and look for evidence that potentially disagrees, right? Especially the things that we believe strongly in our hearts. Because again, it is our human tendency to want to be correct, and we do it by looking for information that agrees. Ironically, it prevents us from being correct. Okay, so I think I hit that hard enough, hopefully. What else did we learn? And this is that point, right? To get at the truth, you must look to disconfirm. It's not intuitive. And so one of the things that hopefully you're going to be doing throughout this class is practicing this. Practicing looking for your bias, practicing being open to other potential evidence, right? Okay. So that brings us to a really important aspect of science. Science is what we call empirical. It follows this principle of empiricism. Okay. Empirical and empiricism is when you base things on observation. Now, observation has kind of a loose meaning, actually, in science. When you think of observation normally, it's seeing things with your eyeballs, right? If I'm observing something with my eyeballs, then that's observation, clearly, right? But we can observe things in other ways, right? I could observe someone through a video camera. I could observe someone through a tape recorder. I can even observe someone by having them tell me things about themselves, right? It's an indirect way of observing, but I am observing. And so anything that allows us to collect data is observation. And yes, to Ashley, you should. It's a good idea to be taking notes. In fact, hopefully you took some notes on what we just talked about with confirmation bias. Okay, so with empiricism, our goal is to collect our data with observation. So our hypotheses are going to be tested with some form of observation, collecting data. Okay, so that's what that means. What I'm going to do right now is I am going to put you into small groups, and I want you to pick out one topic that all four of you are interested in, right? It could be anything, right? Whatever it is that you're interested in. And then I want you to think about a couple questions, right? What is a research question or other questions that you could test empirically? In other words, you could somehow observe it. It could mean literally looking with your eyeballs. It could mean using an instrument. So I can observe your weight by having you stand on a scale. I can observe your blood pressure by using a blood pressure cuff. I can observe what's going on inside your brain by using an MRI. Or I could actually just ask you, and I could look at your answers on a piece of paper, right? But in some way, I'm observing you, right? So I want you to come up with some questions, and just pick one question of the questions, your favorite one, right? And you're going to respond, you're going to submit your response to this Google form. So I'm going to copy this and put it in the chat, but be thinking right now about a topic you are interested in, right? And you're going to pick a question and submit it to this Google form. Okay, so I'm going to set up the breakout rooms. Oh wait, no, I need to give me a sec. Let me give you the link. Okay, so the link is in the chat. Make sure at least one person has opened that up. And my screen one more time. So make sure you note what you're doing. You're going to pick a topic as a group. Maybe the topic is, I don't know, risky behavior with COVID-19. Or maybe it's microaggressions. Or maybe it's, you know, what makes someone more likely to be hired? Or whatever you're interested in, right? Pick a topic and then come up with a research question and submit it to this box. All right. I'm going to set up these breakout rooms, recreate. And I'm going to add interpreter's spec room here. Okay, so go ahead and think about your topic, pick a question, and submit it to that form. Here we go. I'm going to give you about 2.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, what topic were you guys thinking, or did you guys have in mind?
I don't have a topic in mind. So far.
Um,
Do you have a topic in mind?
well, I don't know. I was thinking people's attitudes. I don't know. Just
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Just throwing it out there. I don't know. Just an idea, I guess. I don't know. That's the first thing that popped in my head.
Yeah.
Sure.
Or one right now she said attitude or behavior.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I say eating. Eating is a
Okay.
behavior. So like now that we're in pandemic,
Right.
like triggering because my cousin I just saw her like recently and
Mhm.
she eats when she's bored.
But that's true, yeah.
So how many of us has done that since like this past year? Because since a lot of us are gaining weight instead of losing the weight. So that's just
Hmm.
a thought.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I like that.
I agree, though. That's true.
Also-
and, because we were in quarantine.
Mhm.
Also, with that, social media, I think also is affecting people
That's a good
because
topic,
normally
social media.
we're outside and we're a lot more positive. So I think that's also attributing to how people feel.
Yes,
They're getting a little more
100%.
depressed.
Hmm. I agree 100%.
Oh, and sorry guys, my name is Ashley. I forgot to introduce myself. We just jumped on in.
And I'm Amber.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too,
Jocelyn.
Ashley. So with COVID, that's another topic, maybe the vaccines. I think a lot of people are really uneasy about whether or not they should take it because they're not sure whether it's safe.
I agree. That's a very good topic too.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have ideas?
Well, another would just be how the world is changing, climate change. I mean, look, recently we've got the data of the snowstorms that Texas has been having in the Southwest.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Weather.
weather.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, last summer it was our wildfires were going crazy.
Yes, so that's other data for that climate change.
Good idea.
It feels like COVID, even without COVID, before that, I mean, we were like, okay, we know we're going to have fires. That's kind of normal. But it's almost like everything's multiplying on us, right? Right now, it's like, okay, we've always had some forest fires. Okay, we've had some kind of wonky weather. But since COVID, it just seems like it's been worse. The forest fires were worse. We've got snow in Texas. Just seems like it's getting worse or multiplying.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so what did
What did you type? Did
what
someone
do you
just type something? Let me check. Who was that? I'm sorry. I'm trying to watch the interpreter and what's being typed.
Oh,
Oh, I think that we have like a minute to decide on what we want to submit.
oh wait, don't we have a link? What's your response to your
Yeah,
answer?
she put it on the chat.
Okay, so your answers. Oops. No, my bad. So, my response form, is that what it is?
Yeah, we have to submit our responses. What do you guys agree on?
Okay.
Social media or?
I mean, all of our ideas are good, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've got a lot of changes during the pandemic. Maybe we can do something about people's worldview now.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah, I mean,
I mean, I'm just throwing
I think
ideas
they're
out
all
there.
great. Whatever we all agree on, I'm okay with.
Should we just put all three, or I'm not sure.
Okay. So hopefully you introduced yourself. Make that a habit, right? When you meet new people, say who you are, and you maybe came up with some really interesting topics. We're going to take a look in a second here, but before we do, can someone tell me? You can type it in the chat, or you can go ahead and just talk out loud.
Could you repeat that? You froze up and I didn't hear you.
Oh yeah, no problem. Okay, so what does empirical mean? And I'm going to give you a page number in case you wanted to look it up. Okay. Empiricism is talked about on page 5, 6, and 10. So if you wanted to look in your book, you can look there too. Oh, and I am going to start recording again, just so you're aware.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so we're talking about what is empiricism. So there is a definition of it on page 10. And it looks like we got something in the chat. Okay, so something that's verifiable. Yeah, that's a little bit broad though. Let's be more specific.
The definition from the book, it says involves using evidence from the senses or from instruments that assist the senses.
Good. Yeah, so it's involving data, right, that's coming from the senses or instruments that help enhance in some way our senses, right? Good. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. An empirical question is a question that we can answer. That's important, right? We can answer it. And we can answer it by using our senses in some way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And let's take a look at the questions we've come up with. And they're anonymous. We don't know who said what, right? So I want to give you a chance to look at the potential topics people came up with. But I also want you to think about, are the questions empirical? Can we answer them with data that we collect from our senses or an instrument that helps our senses? All right, so here's a question. Can social media change a person's way of life? Do we think that we can answer this question empirically? Can we observe it? Yeah, I agree. This is something we can observe. You know, I would say that we want to be a little bit more specific, right? Because their way of life is really broad. That could mean almost anything, right? And so you would be watching a lot as a researcher. You'd have to pay attention to everything. So yeah, you could observe a person's whole life, but it is a lot to have to observe. All right. Can social media change someone's outlook on certain things? So maybe we picked a particular thing, right? This should also be observable. It's a little bit more specific version of this first question. Okay, let's look at this next one here. How do fears, can fears, let's say that, can fears transform into phobia? No, how do fears? Yeah, how do fears transform into phobias? Okay, can we answer this question, how do fears transform into phobias? Can we answer it empirically? Can we observe it somehow?
It takes longer to observe.
Yeah, I think that it's possible, but I think this is a much harder question, right? I think that we could be more specific with our question and it would be easier to observe, right? If we came up with, let's say, can X transform a fear into a phobia, right? If we come up with something more specific, so can a certain situation transform a fear into a phobia, or can a certain type of thing transform a fear into a phobia? The more specific we are, the easier it is to come up with how we would observe it. Right? Okay. Did your eating habits change before and after COVID-19? Do you think that we can somehow observe that? Yes. Right? Now, part of it would be asking people to reflect on their past, right? And we'll talk about self-report and the pros and cons of self-report later in the class, but it is a way technically of observing, right? So yes, we can do that. That is empirical. Has the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent quarantine lockdown caused mental deterioration? In this case, depression. Can we answer this question empirically? Go ahead and type into the chat. What do you think? Can we answer it empirically? Yeah, I would say yes. There's a lot of things potentially, but we could, just like with eating habits, we could compare before and after the quarantine to see if mental health has changed. Now, one of your classmates brings up a good point. There are a lot of factors. So it would be hard to say for sure that it was, the quarantine or lockdown as opposed to other different things. That is a good point to bring up, but we could still try to observe it, right? Okay. Would taking a look at a brain for these be considered empirical? Yes. Yeah, I mean, any way that you are observing is an empirical method. So if you're observing using, let's say, an MRI machine, right? That's an instrument that helps to enhance our sight. And so it's technically a form of empirical data collection. Yeah. Okay, behavior of people after limited social interaction due to a pandemic for a long period of time. Okay, so we just want to look at the behavior. So what are the behaviors of people after this limited interaction? Is that a question we can answer empirically? What are the behaviors of people after limited social interaction due to the pandemic? Yes, good, we can observe that, right? We can watch people and see what their behaviors are. All right, let's do this next one. How online learning affects children's social abilities with others. Okay, so let's make this into a question that's a little bit easier to think about. Does online learning affect children's social abilities with others? So what do you think? Can we test that question? Does online learning affect children's social abilities with others? Yeah, good. Okay. what qualities improve chances of being hired? Really interesting question. Can we observe that? Yeah. I think that's a super cool question if people want to explore that this semester. Okay, testing to see if eating chocolate before sleeping will give you nightmares. Okay. So does eating chocolate before sleeping give you nightmares? Is that something that we can test empirically? Okay, we're getting kind of mixed reviews here. I would say yes. Okay, we can either give people chocolate or not, and then we can see if they have nightmares. And one way could be through brain scans, but we could also just wake people up in the middle of sleeping and see if they're having a nightmare, right? Usually when you're in the middle of a nightmare, you remember it if you get woken up. So I think we could observe that, right? Remember, observation is a fairly broad term. So asking other people about what's going on inside of themselves, it technically counts, right? Okay, now, I don't know what the question is here, but we do have a question about social media. So, can we observe social media? We definitely can, right? We for sure can. Now, what aspect of social media we're wanting to observe is going to be important, right? Just like how with our other question up here, can social media change a person's way of life? That's such a broad thing, right? Your way of life is everything about yourself. We want to try to be a little bit more narrow so we don't have to look at and observe everything. It's too much, right? So the more particular, the easier it is for us to answer our questions. Awesome. Okay, it seems like you guys have a really good grasp actually at picking questions that we can answer empirically. So yay, good job. All right, so let's jump back in now. I'm going to share our, great. We did this. And keep that process in mind. You're going to be on your own brainstorming some topics a little later. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about different types of research. There are 3 primary types of research that this particular textbook talks about. One of them is basic research. Another is translational research. And the third is applied research. So I'm going to give you some broad definitions of each of these things, and then we'll go into their examples. Okay. So basic research is when we're really looking to understand something for its own sake. We're interested in knowledge just to learn more, right? It's knowledge for knowledge's sake. So with basic research, we're really just trying to understand how does something work because we're interested in how it works, right? It's just that basic sense of curiosity and learning how things fit together. And we're not necessarily trying to do anything with that information. We just care about what the information is, right? Okay. Applied research is on the other side of this. And this is when we are doing our research because we actually want to use it to inform decisions. So in some way, we're going to use that research to maybe like make a choice about what textbook we should use in a class, or what style of lecture should be used. Or maybe we're going to use that to find out, you know, should we be spending money on this type of policy? And politicians might use research. That would be applied research. If we're trying to figure out, is this anti-drug program effective? So for instance, if you were in school, I think maybe the most recent editions of it didn't happen, but if you were in school about like 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, they probably were doing the DARE program, D-A-R-E. How many of you guys had the DARE program ever when you were in school? Yeah, okay, so we're getting some yeses here. So for you all, This example might be particularly pertinent. We did research on the DARE program. In fact, a lot of research on the DARE program. And that's a good thing because when it first started and we first did research on it, what we found is that it did nothing. It did not work. It did not prevent kids from using drugs. It did not reduce the amount of drugs kids were using if they were using drugs. It did nothing. In fact, one of the only things that they found from the DARE program was that it actually just made people distrust police. So I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but whatever it was, right? We increased distrust in the police, and that's really all that program did. Now, because of that research, though, they did try to modify the program. So I don't know what the DARE program looks like anymore, but we're continuing to do research on it to fix it and make it so it actually does what we want it to. And that is applied research. We're making decisions in the real world based on the research we do. Okay? Now, the in-between here is what we call translational research. This is when we're taking an idea we learned about from basic research. So, in this case, this question is, what parts of the brain are active when experienced meditators are meditating? The basic question behind this is, when you meditate, what parts of your brain are highlighting, are doing things? We're just trying to understand how our brains work to some extent in the context of meditation. And that's not for any purpose except to know, right? The second question here, translational research, we're looking to see, can meditation improve college students, their GRE scores? But we're doing it in a laboratory setting. That's important here. We're controlling some things, right? And so we're not looking at everyone. We're not looking at, can meditation, impact everyone in a positive way. We're looking at a very specific situation, and we're controlling things by doing it in a lab, right? We're not looking in classrooms. We're looking in a controlled situation. And it helps us to get rid of potential problems that might happen. This gives us an idea if maybe our idea that we came up with basic, if that idea could work in the real world. It's giving us that glimpse of it, right? So in our laboratory setting, are we getting something that's promising, right? So we're translating it from basic to applied. The very applied question is, in the real world, does it work? Right? Okay, so does anyone have any questions on this? Do you understand the differences between our three types of research? I'm going to stop share here. Give me a thumbs up if you get it. Give me a thumbs down if you want me to go over it again. I'm happy to go over it again. I'm getting like moderate yeses. Okay, so remember, you can go back and review the recording, but I think that we're doing pretty good. Okay. So now that we understand these basic types, something I want to tell you is that it actually doesn't matter. There's not a value to one or the other, right? Basic research is not any better or worse than applied research. They don't really even necessarily use different methods. They can use the same technique. The difference is the goal to inform decision, or is the goal just to learn just because we're interested? Okay, so this brings us to who you guys are going to be in this class and maybe in the future. Yes, okay, so I had a question about the difference between translational and basic. Let me go back really quick, because it's a good question. Translational research is different in that we're starting to be interested in whether our basic idea could be useful in the real world, but we're doing it in a controlled setting. So we're doing it in a laboratory, typically, right? In our controlled setting, does this have an impact? So from there, we go to the real world, where things are messy, life is messy. And then we see if it really works out. So basic research is just for knowledge's sake. We're not really trying to use it towards any goal of decision making or anything like that, right? It's just for the sake of knowledge. Okay, cool. All right, so research producers. You all are going to be research producers, but I want you to see an image of who research producers are, just generally speaking, because you might have gotten a different view. Okay, so we're going to watch this video, and I need to make sure I'm getting my sound.
And if you can just make sure to tap that CC button. It's a
Thank
little
you.
friendly reminder.
Yes.
My favorite teacher in high school was a psychologist, and we took a high school psychology class. And the moment I took that class, I said, that's what I want to be.
I was always interested in psychology, I think as far as both junior high school and high school. So I went into college with that interest, and particularly in terms of psychoanalytic theory. And I just enjoyed learning about people, about how they think and so on.
I knew I wanted to do something that would sort of help society in some way, but I didn't know what it was. I had a teacher who taught child development, and she I think was the one that really got me interested in psychology.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there. You do have access to the link if you want to watch more of that video, but I wanted to show you something different maybe than what you've seen. When you took Psych 1A and maybe any other classes, you probably learned about, to be honest, a lot of old white men. And the reality of the situation is that more psychologists today are women, and there are more and more people who are not white in this field. I want you to know this. It's important because whoever you are, whatever your identity is, you can be a psychologist. You belong here, right? When I learned about psychology, I think I learned about maybe 2 women psychologists ever. So I want you to know that today there are more people that are not cis het, so not cis and not heterosexual than there have ever been within this field. So you are a research producer. And why are we so important? We're important because we're going to change things. We're going to make decisions. All right, I'm actually going to skip through this because I'm going to talk about this on Wednesday. So don't worry about this. We'll come back to this in a bit. So I do want to get to a slide really quickly here. Where is it? Yeah, here. Okay. This is the end task I wanted you to have for today. I want you to take a few minutes, and it doesn't have to be right now, but before our next class period on Wednesday, I want you to take a few minutes and brainstorm some ideas of things that you are interested in for this semester. So remember, you just learned about how to make empirical research questions. I want you to come up with 3 ideas that you're interested in. Now, I have some suggestions here of things that I've seen work really well. Person perception tends to work really well, but you guys have come up with some interesting things already, right? So this is just a place to start potentially. How are perceptions of blank influenced by blank, whatever it is. That's a place to start. write down those 3 ideas and bring them with you to class on Wednesday because we will be using them. So you need to have done it before class. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here and see, does anyone have any questions before we go? Okay, one last thing then. Sorry, say it one more time, you cut out.
Sorry.
Could you type into the chat? I'm not sure if you can hear me, but if you can type into the chat, it's kind of hard to hear you right now. Okay, so while she's doing that, make sure that by midnight tonight, you click on your week 1 live feedback assignment. This is your homework for tonight. Okay. Make sure that you do this by midnight tonight. Oh, good. Okay, yes. I will hook you up. Amber, I'm going to hook you up with your note taker via email. Is that okay?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time? I'm so sorry. I was just, I was a little bit blocked by the other windows. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'm going to hook you and the note taker up by email. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'll be great.
Okay, wonderful. All right, does anyone have any other questions for me before we go today?
Professor?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm actually looking to add to class. So, if it's possible, can I get an ad code, please?
Yeah. So, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.
The recording has stopped.
Awesome. And we'll just go ahead and conclude class for today. If you do have questions about anything that we've covered,